Trump Defense Secretary nominee Pete Hegseth faces a barrage of accusations from Democrats during his confirmation hearing. President-elect Trump proposes a bold replacement for the IRS. And late-night talk show hosts put the spotlight on Trump during the LA wildfires rather than the people that are actually in office. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Tuesday, January 14th. This morning, the Senate held its confirmation hearing for Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump's pick for defense secretary. And Hegseth faced off with Democrats over his stance on women in the military, with some senators going as far as to call him a misogynist.
If you are saying that women shouldn't be serving in the military, and I'm going to read you your quotes, because the quotes themselves are terrible. You will have to change how you see women to do this job well, and I don't know if you are capable of that.
At least they know what a woman is. Here to discuss with me is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Shaun Rieley. He's the director of educational programs and a teaching fellow at Hillsdale College in Washington, D.C. on their campus, and an Iraq war veteran as well. So, Shaun, thanks for joining the show. Let's just start with some of your main takeaways from the Hegseth hearing this morning.
Yeah, so I didn't get to watch the whole thing. It was quite long, so I'll just start by saying that. But I think his opening statement was very strong. I think, and then the responses or rather the questions that were posed by the senators, it was kind of predictable on both sides, with Republicans being generally supportive, Democrats being generally oppositional, including the ranking member Reid. But I think Hegseth held his own. I've known Pete for a while. I'm not surprised about that, but I was happy to see that he was able to hold his own. He had well-prepared answers. He's an articulate guy. In fact, I have been with him when he's been on the Hill and this sort of thing in the past. So I'm not surprised by that, but I was happy to see it. I think he's a strong candidate, and I think he held his own today.
Shaun, it's great to have you on the show. Tell our audience a little bit more about what you know about Hegseth, given that you have worked with him, you've known him for a little bit. What do you feel like people should really know that they're not hearing?
Yeah, so Pete and I worked together at Concerned Veterans for America for a couple of years. I actually had left. I came to D.C. to work at the American Legion, and after a couple of years there, I became disgruntled with the kind of status quo of the veteran world. Saw that Pete was doing great things over at TV. I jumped ship, went to work for him there. We worked on a bunch of stuff, including veterans healthcare reform, which ended up coming to fruition in the Trump administration with the Mission Act. And so we did a lot of good work. Pete is a great leader. I didn't serve in the military with him, but I certainly was able to reap the benefits of the leadership that he honed in the military as we worked together on policy and so forth. And Pete's a stand-up guy. It's certainly true, as he's admitted, that he's had issues with his personal life. This is not uncommon for any number of people, but certainly in the veteran world, this is something that happens. It's unfortunate, but I don't think this is disqualifying for him. I certainly didn't see in my time any of the kind of raucous parties or that sort of thing that have been alleged. And so, I think Pete is my takeaway from having known him for going on 10 years now, is that he's a solid leader. He's a stand-up guy, who's had troubles, who's had struggles like we all have, but is, I think, well qualified to lead in this capacity.
Well, it's no surprise the leftists don't really agree with you. And you did mention Senator Reid. Let's go ahead and listen to what he had to say about Pete Hegseth earlier today.
Mr. Hegseth, I do not believe that you are qualified to meet the overwhelming demands of this job. We must acknowledge the concerning public reports against you. A variety of sources including your own writings, implicate you with disregarding the laws of war, financial mismanagement, racist and sexist remarks about men and women in uniform, alcohol abuse, sexual assault, sexual harassment, and other troubling issues.
Okay, so kind of what we would expect somebody on the left to come out and say. But Shaun, if you look at the last 4 years of the Biden administration and what they would consider qualified for this job, break that down for me. How do you see that? Just for them to go out there and do what they've done, the botched Afghanistan withdrawal, everything on since then. How do they come out here with a straight face and say, oh, but this guy, he's not qualified?
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking maybe, but not surprising. The whole DEI policy, this came up a lot, which Pete is on record opposing, I think rightly. This sort of by definition ensures that people that are less qualified in the correct ways, but more qualified in the sort of preferred ways of the DEI, that is diversity, equity, and inclusion programs get elevated, and the sort of factors that comes into play there aren't really relevant for the kinds of jobs that are required in the military, whether that's competence in leadership or just sheer physical ability to do the job. There's lots of things going on that sort of undermine the capacity of the military to really do its job. And I think that's what Pete's looking to hone in on. That's what Pete is really attacking. He's done so on record in a number of places in his books, in his mentioned his recent podcast with Shaun Rieley, various other places. He's not been shy about talking about the problems that this poses. So, you talk about qualifications, that came up a lot. Does he have the typical resume for what a defense Secretary of Defense? No. But in some ways, I think that's a good thing, right? We need change. What we've been doing is not working. Clearly, lots of incompetence is going on at the Department of Defense. Certainly lots of questionable things in terms of budget and that sort of thing. So he talks about auditing the Department of Defense, certainly something that's needed, and various other things. These are the problems that, the kind of defense industry complex does not want you to look at.
No, and like you say, I mean, if the typical resume is not working, we don't want any more of that. We've had a complete abject failure in the managerial professional class, and the sort of person that you would want to bring in. So I don't have any problem with that either. I think the audience understands that. I think that's why he's such an interesting pick. And also just some of the public statements, like I love what he said already about COVID. I mean, he's already said he's going to go back and rectify that, reinstate people who unjustly lost their job. That's great. You mentioned the DEI. I want to make sure we talk about his faith, though. We should take a listen to him on this topic and get your take.
And as Jenny and I pray together every morning, all glory, regardless of the outcome, belongs to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. His grace and mercy abounds each day. May his will be done.
Yeah, I was really glad when I heard that. I think that's, hey, anytime the name of Jesus gets said in a Senate hearing, I'm all for it, so long as it's said reverently and not as a curse word, right? I have no doubt about Pete's faith. Certainly, again, he's struggled, as we all have. We've all done things we're not proud of, but I have no doubt about Pete's faith, and it seems that in the last few years, he has rectified many of his past mistakes. He's come to the Lord and, is repentant, and that's good enough for me.
When you look at Donald Trump and his administration, whether it is Pete Hegseth or somebody else that actually gets confirmed for this job, we see the over 40,000 recruitment deficit that we have right now in our military. We know a lot of the problems. What should Trump's number one priority be when it comes to defense?
I think the number one priority is, of course, rebuilding our defense base, and ensuring that we can that we can kind of retrench. We've been highly extended across the world for the past 20 years, getting into wars and things like this that have no clear result. Obviously, the end of Afghanistan was a debacle. It was embarrassing for all of those for all of us who served. I didn't serve in Afghanistan, but in those wars. And so showing showing Americans that it's something to be proud of, military service, something to be proud of. One of the problems that we've seen is that military service is a family business, if you like. One of the things we've seen is that parents are telling their kids, do not join the military. I do not feel comfortable with you joining the military at this time. So we need to get back to a place where people are proud to serve in the military, where people are proud of their country, and parents are willing to endorse their children serving in the military. I have to say, having served myself, I'm not sure that I would at this point, given the way that things are, encourage my children to do so. But I look forward to a day when I could.
Yeah, it's well said. So many people feel that way now. And it really is people who don't want to feel that way. And I'd say that I'm personally one of those people. I would love nothing more than to say, my son, go to West Point. That would be an honorable, noble thing to do. And yet you look at it, and even people who are in charge of the whole deal are like, it's not a good scene. Let's talk about the most controversial thing, I think, so far, or what's been picked up by Joni Ernst and others as, I'm going to hedge my bets on this and get your take on whether you think this confirmation is going to happen. Because his comments about the women in the military specifically, right, I think have shifted the Overton window on that topic. We haven't heard anyone really argue that topic in public in a long time, and he said some things that are very controversial there. So they're talking about that in Congress today, and that's something where the moderates, right, are bringing up their concerns about this candidate. So speak to that and what you think his chances are.
I think his chances are quite good. Look, I'm from a time, I was in the infantry. I'm from a time when there were no females in combat roles. I think it worked very well. We had enough problems as it was, even without adding that extra complication. I also say when we were in Iraq, we served next to a military police unit that was integrated in that way, and they had all sorts of additional problems. I watched it happen. I think he's onto something. I think these policies, the kind of opening of combat roles to women, was pushed through for reasons that had little to do with efficacy and had everything to do with the top brass in the Pentagon wanted it done. In fact, there was the Marine Corps did a study, I believe it was in 2014, where their results came back saying, look, integrated units are far less capable, far less lethal in the battlefield, but they ignored it and they went ahead with it, and it's untested at best. I think common sense will tell us that it's unlikely to ever be the case that that sort of thing will go well. I say at the very least, if you must have it, you should have kind of all male and all female infantry units or something like that. This is what Israel has. My understanding is what Israel has gone back to. They had tried the kind of integrated thing for a while, and again realized it didn't work, and had moved back to that. In my understanding, I'm not an expert on that, but that's my understanding. So I think it's onto something. I think it has to be said. There's also the additional issue of women being drafted, which is not going through yet, but it is a perennial question when combat roles are open to women. And I'll say, as the father of two daughters, I'm not very happy about that prospect. I'm not looking forward to the possibility of my daughters having to register for the selective service. So I think that all of these things need to be questioned. We have to go back and think through the reasons why they were done, and really think about going back to what was long tested and worked for millennia, really.
It seems so simple. Let's hope that we can turn it all around because it's only the country at stake after all. Shaun, thanks
Right.
so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Matthew, when you listen to him, I mean, he had the whole list of different things that we covered there, but the women in the military is just one of those things that you're like, it doesn't make sense on its head, especially in a combat role. And now it's one of these things that, again, we're going to see brought back into the mainstream. Like you said, though, it had been pushed off to the side for quite some time.
Yeah, it wasn't something you could talk about anymore. I mean, I remember growing up, it was a big, G.I. Jane, the movie. There's a debate, right? I mean, it was a thing, and it just became no. This is just the way it is. And Hegseth is very interesting because he's not afraid to talk about those things. And I would say with Shaun, he represents. It's anecdotal, but he represents a number of people that I know who really vouch for the guy and think he is the right choice. And it's very interesting because if you had said this to anyone in Washington, D.C. a year ago, that Pete Hegseth from Fox News would be, in charge of the Department of Defense, you would have been laughed out of the world, right? This is such a shift in Washington. And it's really interesting to see it almost to the point of success, almost happening.
Well, it's going to be an interesting week. And when we come back, Chris Bedford is going to give us his forecast on the rest of the week's confirmation hearings. Stay with us. Well, it's a new year. Now it's time to focus on what actually matters. You want to create some healthier habits. You want to spend more time with your family, and you want to spend less money going out to eat. Well, GoodRanchers.com, they can help you with all of your resolutions and turn them into solutions. When you buy your meat from Good Ranchers, you're directly supporting the local farms and ranches in the United States, and you can skip all of the chaos and all that imported meat that they have at the grocery store. Good Ranchers delivers high-quality, 100% American meat straight to your door so you can start 2025 with the better choices, meals, and moments to have at home. Visit GoodRanchers.com and use my code Jill to claim $25 off, plus free express shipping and your choice of free ground beef, chicken, or salmon in every order for an entire year. So if spending more time with your family and less money going out to eat and trying to just enjoy that quality American food, if that's all on your list, then be sure to visit GoodRanchers.com and use my code Jill today for meat that delivers just that. GoodRanchers.com. Use code Jill to claim $25 off and free meat in every box for a year. GoodRanchers.com. American meat delivered. The Pete Hegseth hearing might be Democrats' biggest dream come true, right? Hegseth, he was the only confirmation hearing of the day, and naturally, we saw all the Democrats come after Hegseth with all of the attacks that they had on his character. So here to break it down for us is Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford. So Chris, we'll move on to everybody else here in just a minute, but we do have to get your take on Pete Hegseth and what you thought of his hearing this morning.
Well, it was a difficult hearing, and it was always going to be a difficult hearing. Democrats have a couple of different things that they're going to worship at. Gay, transgender, and female pregnant soldiers are really among some of their important things these days, and they act like that's completely normal, and anyone who's ever questioned it is some kind of apostate. So they're going to come after him on that. Hegseth was the victim of an incredible smear campaign. He was accused by some anonymous former producer at Fox News of drinking one of the sample beers on St. Patrick's Day after taping was finished, which is, I think, a completely standard thing to do. And he also, of course, has had a tumultuous personal life where he cheated on 2 wives and now has 2 children, and he's got a big family. And he made a very strong pitch for himself as someone who has made mistakes in the past, but who has been saved by Christ. I don't think I've ever seen Christianity feature so prominently in opening statements right from the beginning, in his answers, in his humility. He threw himself at the foot of the cross on that, saying that he was someone who's made mistakes in the past, but has a wonderful, loving family, named all of his children, loves his wife, and is eager to serve, and even committed to, despite having no actually real reported issues with alcohol, said he wouldn't even drink alcohol while he was Secretary of Defense were he to be confirmed. He also did something that you haven't really seen from a lot of Secretaries of Defense in some time, which is talk about what it was like to be in combat, to be to actually fight America's wars, to kneel before crosses in the desert of friends, to carry bodies. He was able to talk very viscerally about that, and he was smooth. He was well coached. He had answers. He got a couple of good zingers in there against Elizabeth Warren, Mazie Hirono, other Democratic senators who came at him. And I think after today, you always knew it was going to be bruising. You always knew there was going to be some difficulties for him and some very awkward questions for him. But he did well for Republicans who are, I would say at the end, likely to vote to confirm.
Chris, I want to get your take on what you think his chances are. But just zooming out to all of President Trump's nominees, recent Politico piece. I mean, Politico is actually arguing Trump's nominees are actually likely, right, to move forward and be confirmed. And that is quite the shift, I think, in everyone's mind from just a few weeks ago. What do you think has changed?
You know, it was a fairly quick narrative shift, and some of it was, on a large part, social media and attacks on different Republicans who, after rubber stamping Joe Biden's nominees, rubber stamping his agenda and not wanting to fight, suddenly seemed to find a little bit of courage. They're going to attack Donald Trump and his nominees. There was a quick charm offensive. There was also there was a mixture of hammer and stick. The nominees went around Capitol Hill well guided. They were talking to every senator, answering questions, making different commitments. Being generally, a lot of these folks who are under attack, whether it's RFK or Hegseth, are people who are pretty charming and are pretty intelligent and come across well in these private conversations and have been willing to make these certain agreements with different Republicans. That, combined with the pain of those Republicans who were going to be tougher on them than they were on Biden's nominations, kind of sealed the deal. And I was with some members of the Trump transition, senior members. Excuse me. I was with some senior members of the Trump transition the weekend after that narrative shift, and they were joyful. They said every aspect of this has changed, and they think that their guys are going to get confirmed after, of course, the early loss and withdrawal of Matt Gaetz.
Yeah, can I just go back to that, because I thought at the time, whether it was on purpose or not, it really did seem like putting Gaetz out there shifted the Overton window, right? Where it blew everybody's mind. People were losing their, losing their cool, going crazy. And it really does feel like, regardless of whether that was intentional or not, it drew a lot of fire and ire. And then once he kind of recused himself, all of a sudden you're like, well, Pete Hegseth makes sense, I mean, it's almost as if you went as far as you could in the Overton window to blow everyone's mind, and then it made the other folks look moderate. This is a tactic that Alexander Hamilton famously used in the Constitutional Convention, going way too far in the powers of the president, so it's almost a king, shocking everyone, and then it made a powerful executive look good. I'm not saying it's on purpose, but do you think that did play into this?
I heard right off the bat from some pretty intelligent political observers, and we might have talked about it ourselves, that Gaetz' plan was always to put someone out there who was outside the Overton window, just like you said, to shift the entire thing, to get him out of Congress in time before this completely punitive report was released that took where his colleagues basically ignored what the DOJ had found and decided to do their own report, allow him to provide some covering fire, do a solid for Donald Trump, and at the same time really save a lot of face for whatever he wanted to do next, because now at this point he's basically been martyred by Democrats. That was laid out to me within 20 minutes of him first being nominated, and I thought maybe that's a bit far, but hey, every aspect of it turned out to be true. And at the same time, it's really when they started the Republicans started to also go after other candidates and other people like Tulsi Gabbard. That's when they got smacked, and they said, no. We gave you one who was a non-starter for a lot of Republicans because of some of his personal issues and accusations, and honestly, the way he worked with a lot of his colleagues. We gave you one, but that is it, and any other thing will be punished. And that's kind of a compromise, to your point. Out of political compromise, you let the senators, you pat them in the back, say, look, you got a scalp, but let's be serious. There's no more scalping to be done.
Well, Bedford, I want to look ahead to the DOJ because we did just get the first volume of former special counsel Jack Smith, his report on Donald Trump, where Smith's actually doubling down on the decision to bring criminal charges against Trump, where he said he was resorting to a series of criminal efforts to retain power after the 2020 election. Now, we know the inauguration is just a couple days away. Do we think this report actually means anything for Trump and his presidency at this point, right? He's going to be inaugurated on Monday.
Reports don't do anything. I mean, this almost seems like something Republicans would do. We're gonna launch another report. We're gonna send a mean tweet at you. Jack Smith is a sad character. He's someone who has had no real impact on history. He's been an embarrassment. He was given a job, and it was to be a pit bull to attack and use lawfare against Donald Trump. He failed. And at the end of the day, this is just kind of embarrassing himself. You know, it reminds me actually a little bit of the way there's been a couple of Republican investigations over the decades, whether it was the Starr report against Bill Clinton or whether it was the Benghazi investigation, that seemed like they had a lot of fire and they got a lot of people really excited. And they were taken well past their logical conclusions. And the American people at the end were not interested. They didn't really care. They'd moved on by the time this happened. This assignment's been sent in late. It makes no difference. He's gone now, and Jack Smith is little more than a footnote in history. Thank goodness.
Yeah, it really is remarkable to think about and highlight the difference between now and before, and talk about how we got here. Like, how did this happen? Because we have to say, I mean, the lawfare wasn't a joke. Right? In the past, it was not a joke. These people really wanted to put Trump in prison. And they tried in multiple places, in multiple ways. And I remember thinking, arguing with people like, oh, that's impossible. That would never happen. That is possible. That's, in fact, what they intended to do. And I mean, what would you, like, if we were going to list off the factors? Obviously, he won. Obviously, he was assassinated. But the sea change is unbelievable between now and a year ago, because it sounds like what you're saying is sort of what I feel instinctively. Like a lot of people see looking out there is, this is done. This is over with. Literally no one cares, as they say, and we've moved on. But this happened within the space of less than a year, no?
Yeah, and you saw this in Georgia. You saw it in New York. You saw weak cases brought by people who just weren't the best prosecutors. Bragg, of course, got lucky because he had a judge who was completely committed to the resistance and was willing to tolerate all kinds of insanity in order to get Trump, get the orange man. But aside from that, the Democrats really suffered in some of their lawfare from a propensity for promoting or highlighting people who are out of their depths, who didn't do a very good job of it at the end. This was a real threat. I mean, when Donald Trump left office, left New York, moved his residence, Mr. New York, had to go down to Florida and move his residence there to protect himself. Democrats weren't just going to let him sail off into the sunset. They were determined to take his money, to take his businesses, and to take his freedom. The American people get sick of that after a while. Even a lot of partisan Democrats got sick of it after a while. It started to look like the Democrats were doing exactly what they accused Republicans of doing, trying to use the law to put their political opponents in prison. It started to look like that because that's exactly what was happening. And when taken in its totality, bad cases brought by bad attorneys, prosecuting someone who's just because he's a political opponent on these mundane details, it just kind of seeped into the Ukraine hoax, into the Russia hoax, into the whole thing that Donald Trump had actually really, truly, legitimately been persecuted by the Democrats and by the establishment. And Americans don't really cotton to that.
Well, Bedford, we know that Trump has a lot of big plans and big changes in store. He went on True Social today and he was saying that for far too long, we've relied on the great people using the Internal Revenue Service. He's proposing the External Revenue Service that is aimed at taxing all the foreign revenues just to go out there, get the tariffs, duties, and all the revenue that comes from foreign sources. So the plan is supposed to bring back billions of dollars to the economy and level the playing fields for the American businesses. But Bedford, I only like this if it replaces the IRS. We can't have both. You have to pick one or the other. So how likely is that?
I don't think we're getting rid of the IRS as much as
Well,
my
Bedford, it's been fun.
pocketbook as well would appreciate that. I think they're here to stay, and generally government just simply grows. But there is a reality that a lot of the global business community that we've entered as a country has caused a huge amount of actual damage to the businesses, to the economy, to our industrial base, to everyone except for essentially finance. I'm all for competition. I'm all for low taxes, but I am not for the United States making its workers compete with foreign slave states that subsidize their labor, that subsidize their airlines, that subsidize their industry. That's essentially what the United States is doing. I mean, I went online the other day just shopping for stuff for the Blaze. I was looking for a coat rack, and I could buy a full wooden coat rack delivered to the office in 2 days for about as much as it cost me to get a hamburger across the street. What's the difference? The hamburger place doesn't use slave labor, and it's not subsidized postal service shipping for massive corporations. That's a freaky thing. How can you compete with that? Anything that actually tries to level the playing field for the American worker against the world and to build up our industry is important to national security. It's important to the moral fiber of the nation. It's important to employment. It's important to the middle class. I'm here for it.
Amen to that. Yes. Let's go. I think I love the willingness to experiment and the push the boundaries. You know, some of this stuff is going to work, some of it stuff's going to stick, some of it's not. But it really is truly a remarkable time to be alive when you just realize. I mean, who would have thought of this before? External taxation, you know. I mean, Greenland. Yeah. I mean, this is just a pedal to the metal sort of time, and it's incredible. And it's going to be great for all three of us to be together at the inauguration in Washington D.C. It's going to be fun. I can't wait. I can't wait for that because look out. I mean, this is going to be a Blaze News Tonight party.
I expect to see that coat rack out
I
there,
look forward
Bedford.
to hosting you guys in the swamp.
Thanks so much. I'll see you back out there in Washington, D.C. And we'll catch you earlier, though, than that. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
See you then.
Late night hosts shift their attention to Trump while Los Angeles burns. And we'll explain why no one is having the last laugh next. Late night hosts took the opportunity last week to highlight the devastating Los Angeles fires and also bash Trump's response to them.
But there's one thing that we have an endless supply of: good old-fashioned made in America blame. And of course, one of the country's leading blame producers is Donald Trump.
I've been trying to get Gavin Newsom to allow water to come. You'd have tremendous water up there. They send it out to the Pacific because they're trying to protect a tiny little fish, which is in other areas, by the way, called a smelt. And for the sake of a smelt, they have no water.
Here to break this all down for us is Christian Toto. He's the founder of HollywoodInToto.com and host of the Hollywood in Toto podcast. So, Christian, when we look at this, right, there are so many different aspects to break down, but is this the beginning of another era of Trump just dominating late night comedy, right? He's their favorite subject.
Yeah, listen, he will be the president shortly, so he should be the focus. But right now, why not focus on the people who are completely incompetent when it comes to the California wildfires? There are lots of people to blame, including the mayor and the governor, and these hosts won't go near them. You know, if you think you might hear the term URL on a late night show not named Gutfeld, well, good luck. You're not going to find it. But there's comic gold here, and there's also speaking truth to power. They don't want to do that. They want to blame the guy who wasn't around during the catastrophe. That's where their focus is. It's sad, and it's not remotely funny in any capacity.
Yeah, Christian, the interesting thing about this to me is, really? I mean, do you read the room? Do you see the ratings? We've had you wanted to talk about this before, the death of these late night comedy shows. It's one of the saddest things. I mean, there's a generation of people now who don't know these people or this hour as anything other than political, diatribe that's one-sided. And so are we just going to double down on that for another 4 years? I mean, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I think we are. I think it's happening right now. I asked the question a few days ago on social media, is this the new normal where They're going to ignore all the problems, all the lack of planning, all the things we've heard about from legitimate news sources. And the answer is yes. They don't care. But the problem is that there's a whole new media landscape that's blooming up around them. It could be YouTube channels, it could be the Blaze, it could be other outlets that are telling you the truth and steering people to the real problems and the people who are responsible for them. So within this landscape, I don't think that these late night partisans can really just keep doing what they're doing. At some point, there must be people in the audience who say, wait a minute, Jimmy, don't you understand this and that? Why are you ignoring the people who are responsible? Even if you dislike Trump's rhetoric on this or say it's too soon to cast blame, which, by the way, never happens during a shooting, but that seems like it's a perfect time to cast blame. Well, don't they realize the facts on the ground? You've got people in California who are hurting and people who are initiating a recall effort on Newsom as we speak. So there's real blame to go around. And, these comedians should be holding the powerful accountable for their actions. And the reason why we've got such an incompetent class is because they don't. And that has a real world impact on what we see.
Well, we see that the tide is shifting, right? Whether it's the media landscape that is changing. Trump has his inauguration in a number of days, and we see the Trump mandate that is coming down. At what point are they going to figure out, right? Like DEI isn't cool anymore. How long is it going to take for the late night hosts to catch on to this?
I don't know. I think they're bitter clingers at this point. They just won't let it go. Facts be darned. But again, I think the competition from other outlets is it will force them to change their ways to a degree, I think, or they're just going to become irrelevant. Jimmy Kimmel said, I don't think late night TV will be around in 10 years, but I think if they keep going the way they're going, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 4. But, again, I watched Gutfeld recently on Fox, and it's like a different universe where the facts and accountability come into play. And it really is telling jokes that aim at those people. I mean, my gosh, Mayor Bass was questioned by a journalist, and she stood still silently for 90 seconds, 2 minutes. I forget it was the most uncomfortable thing I've ever seen. As a comedian, as a satirist, how do you know that that's in the ecosystem and say, I'm not going to touch that. I'm going to make fun of Trump again. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah, it really is. And this is an interesting one because I feel like we know enough to be able to say on air that there are a lot of people in Los Angeles who were not necessarily, in part of this audience, but friends and acquaintances who are, much more liberal. And these kinds of people are not sitting around going, ha, 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 yeah, blame Trump for this. How dare he? They're looking around at, how the hell this happened. And you can't blame Orange Man Bad for these fires, regardless of it being complicated or, you can say there's different causes. In fact, these are people are all, so it seems so over the top because it feels like the exact audience, right, that you're intended to reach, which is residents of the Pacific Palisades, included, everything just burned down. And now, how many people in California are laughing as hard about this? But so I've had this argument with friends. I've talked to people. I was just talking to someone from California today, actually, Matt Himes, who works with us, right, who you've interacted with, who lost his house. The question is, how many people? I mean, his family is, his house is gone in the Palisades. How many people are going to change, do you think, and are changing because of this? Because I don't want to overemphasize, this, but it seems like even on the lefty side, right? In other words, late night talk show hosts are getting out in front of over their skis.
Yeah, I agree. They may be surprised by the repercussions of what they're saying right now. I want to turn to the soothsayer of Los Angeles, Adam Carolla, and he said he thinks this will change hearts and minds. And the one reason he said, which I think is on point, is that it's not just the fires and the calamity and the losing your house. Those are all awful things. But just wait when it's time to rebuild your house and how California is just a sea of red tape and how problematic that is. So even when they try to rebuild their lives, they'll see what they're up against. And I think that's when it becomes not just a single tragedy, but a kind of a rolling tragedy where they just can't get back their lives. And I think at that point, it will sink in. I think one uppercut, which is devastating, is powerful and may change some hearts and minds. But if it goes on and they see what's the dysfunction in the state, then it's a different situation. That's Adam's take, and I think there's some wisdom in it.
I think that is going to come sooner rather than later. Christian Toto, thanks so much for joining us. When we come back, Matt is going to break down why American history went up in flames in Los Angeles. Coming up. Well, the wildfires in Los Angeles are devastating, and we just went over the late night hosts talking about it. Well, CNN, they couldn't resist either. They put on a lower third that the Los Angeles wildfires ignite a firestorm of conspiracy theories. So, they always make fun of us for the conspiracy theory side. Now they're throwing it out there themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, is Donald Trump causing it a conspiracy theory? Is climate change somehow causing this a conspiracy theory? But what's going on now is everyone realizes this isn't normal, right? This is not a normal event. In a civilized society of this kind, you may have problems with fires on a night where you do have record winds, but it was about 10 years ago, I think, the last time that the Santa Ana winds blew this hard. It wasn't that long ago, but it happens. So it was really windy, right? We know that. And we know it's Southern California, so it's dry. Great. You're going to have problems with fire. But what doesn't happen in a civilized society is that you blow up an entire neighborhood, that you burn a stretch of land much bigger than the Chicago fire, so many years ago that people still talk about in history books. With all the modern technology that we have, with all the knowledge of weather we had, that is absurd. That is not normal. And so people are going to be talking about the causes for some time to come.
They're going to be talking about the causes. I want to talk, though, about the history in Los Angeles, because there's going to be so many things that we will eventually figure out, oh my gosh, that's no longer here. And you can't replace so many of these buildings that have been lost.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize because, and I'm a good person to talk about it because I'm not from California, but I spent, a good over 2 decades there and grew to love Los Angeles, as crazy as that sounds. Notice I don't live there now. I moved 4 years ago to Texas. But what we need to understand about Southern California is that it always has represented the American dream since the end of World War II, because what happened here was remarkable. So you really had the rise of Americana, like what you know as America, not just produced, sort of by Hollywood and Disney and all that kind of stuff early on in a very positive pro-American way, but you had a place where if everything else failed you, right, you could still go west and you could circle west and you end up rolling around and getting down to that bottom corner of the country. And you could buy a house, you could work in manufacturing, and you could live an incredible life. And Jerry Brown's father, right, presided over this area of growth, a building of infrastructure in an incredible way so that you brought life to deserts. And you built some of the most beautiful suburbs in America. And, even if you don't agree with the political views of the movie stars on the beach, right, what signifies success in America than that Malibu skyline? I mean, that's it, right? And there was something beautiful and wholesome about it before, back in the day. And those old neighborhoods, as I said the other day, those old neighborhoods are what is burned down. They're the physical manifestation of a culture that no longer exists. And we hardly even know how to make those craftsman homes anymore. Nonetheless, they're not, you can't afford them. You couldn't afford to build them. So something is irreplaceably gone in American history when all of this stuff burns down. And it's really irreplaceable.
Well, the joke's on you today because you did leave California and you came to Texas and you thought you were getting a red state. But here in the state legislature, the Speaker of the House in the state of Texas, is it a Republican? No, it's not. Not anymore.
Well, so what has happened in Texas is what happened in a lot of red states. And this is what happens. If you move, like I did from California, you move so that you can fight and have an impact. And the good thing about Texas is when you do fight, you can change things. But who are you fighting in red states? You are fighting the Republican Party, which is feckless. And it's feckless here. It doesn't have good leadership. So what they do here, which is absurd, is even though most Republicans voted for a conservative as speaker, the Republicans here like to gang up with Democrats, let everyone vote, and let enough Democrats vote, enough Republicans vote with them to put someone in place who will do what the Democrats want. So in other words, if the Republicans win the House, they don't really win the House because they let the Democrats on to lead the committees and everything else. It's crazy. It's not what happens in the House of Representatives and Congress for good reason. It's absolutely crazy. The good thing is that people here are pissed off about it, and you should be. And if you're not from Texas, doesn't matter. This is something where you need to keep Texas, Texas. You need to keep red states red. And in order to do that, you have to call out this kind of behavior. So basically, Democrats just elected a Speaker of the House in Texas, even though it's red, Senate, House, Governor, Lieutenant Governor. It's shameful, and it needs to be called out. And we cannot stop ridiculing these terribly corrupt people who make it happen.
Listen, I'm going to go talk to Glenn. I hear that there's going to be a little bit more space at Mar-a-Lago in the coming days, weeks, months, years. Maybe we can go there if things don't work out here in Texas. There's some opportunities down there.
It's going to be fine. Texas is getting redder. It's getting better.
It'll be okay. They'll get it figured out, but it might take some time. But that being said, Donald Trump will be moving into the White House very soon, and we will be there to see it all happen. I'm very excited about this, and I'm also pretty excited because there's a report that the garbage truck, the infamous garbage truck that Donald Trump was riding in during the campaign, might make an appearance at the parade.
Speaking of physical history, right? I mean, actual tangible history. The garbage truck is huge. I mean, it's right up there. I mean, I think working at McDonald's was even better, but the garbage truck is right there, and we're going to see it if we watch that parade.
We're going to get French fries for everybody. That's going to be part of the deal. That's going to happen. Blaze, we're going to expense that back to you. It's going to happen. But one of the main things that I did see, and I saw Congressman Corey Mills put out a statement on this. He wanted to make sure that the flags were raised for Trump's ceremony. They're at half-mast right now for Jimmy Carter. We are actually going to get something done. Congress is working on something, and they've actually passed it. So it's actually going to happen that the flags will be at full staff for Donald Trump's inauguration, because that's how it should be, because this is a day that is about Donald Trump, and then we can move on to remembering Jimmy Carter after.
That's good, because if I saw, we wouldn't go, right? If the flags aren't up, we're not going. We need to see those flags all the way up for us to get off the plane. Imagine what it's like to be a swamp creature right now, right? And know what's about to happen. What's about to happen is all of your worst enemies and nightmares, right, are going to walk into all the buildings in D.C. with all the power, and everything's about to flip. I mean, this is an amazing time to be alive, and I get the sense so many people are coming out for this. There's so many different parties, et cetera. It really is unbelievable. So it's going to be a giant party.
Imagine all the swamp creatures that had to watch Pete Hegseth in his confirmation hearing today, and what was going through their mind going, what do you mean we can't get rid of this guy? He's actually going to stay here?
Yes. And look, our job for the next 4 years is to keep the Republicans accountable, the administration accountable, and push them. Don't listen to these moderates or whatever they call themselves. There needs to be accountability. All these people need to be punished for what happened to all of us in the last 4 years.
It's a new day. It's a new year. The Jack Smiths of the world are finally going to be on the sidelines. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and start getting rid of one department after another. Make Doge great again. I can't wait to watch the next 4 years unfold. But be sure to subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you back here tomorrow night.